Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Neela Janakiramanan joining us. Sorry, I was a bit bad pronouncing your name, sorry. Thanks Neela for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Just want to tell everyone a little bit about you before we get into some questions. So Neela is a reconstructive plastic surgeon with particular expertise in complex hand and wrist surgery. She has wide experience working in the public and private health sector. She is a seasoned public speaker and advocate on issues including health equity, gender equity, and diversity and inclusion. She was also one of the medical leads in the Kids of Nauru campaign and is bringing together the Australian medical community and operationalising the Australian Medevac legislation to facilitate medical care for refugees in offshore detention. Neela is a regular contributor to Women's Agenda and has also written for The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, the Saturday paper, and also appears on ABC's The Drum. So thanks, Neela, for joining us. Just wanted to say as well that thanks to Ellen and Unwin, if anyone's watching and they ask a question to Neela, you'll have a chance to win her book, which is The Registrar. I was trying to show my copy there, but it's disappearing. Oh, there it goes, disappearing a little bit. So thanks, Neela. Would you like to start off by telling us a bit about The Registrar?
Yeah, so the registrar it's hard to put in a box in terms of genre. I had lots of conversations with lots of people before it was published and lots of conversations with readers and booksellers since as to what it might be. It's a little bit medical drama. It's a little bit psychological thriller. It's a little bit an expose of what happens in hospitals, specifically in Australia, but I think a lot of the stories are applicable to a more global audience as well. So The Registrar is a novel about healthcare, but it's also about the people who work in healthcare and people who access healthcare. So it's about patients, it's about doctors, it's about nurses, and it's about the adventures and misadventures that you might find within a hospital.
And I have to say that I read it and I really enjoyed knowing that you actually were from that industry. So getting a bit of background information and also the stresses and everything of people working in that industry. So thanks so much for sharing some of that with us. Just wondering how much of it is what is something that might have happened in your life and how much is stuff made up and
Obviously, I mean, it's not a memoir. It is genuinely a novel, but I wrote it to be really true to life on purpose. I love medical drama on TV, but as a clinician, some of the exaggerations, some of the inaccuracies in the way the systems are portrayed or the healthcare issues themselves are portrayed. There's always a source of irritation to me. So, I'm one of those people who throws popcorn at the TV when they get it wrong. And so for me, it was really important to make it as realistic as possible. All of the stories, could have happened to me or to people that I know. Some of them probably did. I had to be really careful about patient confidentiality and also the confidentialities of my colleagues who shared their stories with me. So when I went through and I chose all of the scenes, I worked really hard to pick things that were fairly universal, that could have happened to lots of different people. And then there was a bit of creative license to, just push it that one step further for the sake of the reader.
And you obviously must lead a very busy life. How did you find time to write this? And also, why did you decide that you did want to write it?
I think that we make time for things that are either enjoyable or important to us. And this, for me, ticked both of those boxes. It was writing is a hobby. It's something that I do for fun. And so I make time for it, and my very indulgent family are happy to, give me that space. But this particular story was important to me to write because even though medical drama, in film, in TV is so popular, there's not a lot of literature about it.
No.
And there's certainly very little in any form that is told from a female perspective. And so even though doctors are 50% of are women, most nurses, most allied health workers are all women, 50% of patients are women. There's just this real gap in storytelling about women in this environment, and I thought that was really important.
And when you decided that you wanted to write this, how hard or easy was it to get it published?
Yeah, so I had a very non-traditional pathway towards publication. I wrote a first draft. I was lucky enough to have someone in the industry have a quick look at it and say, nah, it's not ready. Go and work on it for a while. There was no specific feedback beyond that. It was just more a general comment. But I did go and work on it for a while, and I was fortunate that it was shortlisted for a literary award. So it was the Victorian Premier's Literary Award here in Australia. And that's quite a big unpublished manuscript award. And so when that shortlist was announced, I got lots of phone calls from agents and publishers as to, seeking the manuscript to read. And it was actually a slightly difficult time. Melbourne had been through 2 lockdowns since the end of 2020. I do still work as a doctor. I had a huge backlog of work to get through. It was right before Christmas. And so I hadn't really thought very hard about whether I would get an agent or not. But it suddenly became clear to me that I couldn't navigate this industry without help. I just didn't have the time or the knowledge. And so I dug up the email address of an agent that I'd wanted to approach previously, but sort of hadn't had the guts to, and sent it to her, and things sort of rolled on. She took me on. We went through another full editorial process before she sent it off to publishers. A few publishers were interested, and Allen and Unwin bought it, which was great.
Yeah, that's a great story. It doesn't always work out like that for everyone, does it?
No.
And then we've got quite a few people watching, so I just wanted to remind people watching that if you do have any questions for Neela, please type them in comments and I can read them out. And you'll also have, thanks to Allen and Unwin, a chance to win a copy of Neela's book, The Registrar. I do have a question from Sharon. She's wondering if you had to do much research for your book.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm embedded within that world, and I lived a lot of what the main protagonist lives. The scenes themselves were very easy to write. Where I did do a lot of research was around some of the themes of burnout, of mental health issues, of what that actually looks like. And of course I had my own experience to draw on, but I did go off and academically research it so that as the various character arcs develop, I wanted to be able to portray that in an accurate way. That's where my research was.
Yeah. And Wendy says healthcare and related topics are of particular interest to her, and there is a great scope for many stories coming from this sector. Do you think this will be an ongoing subject for you to write in upcoming books?
Great question. I've written a lot of commentary about healthcare and the health sector, particularly over the last couple of years. I am working on another novel, but it is not specifically set within hospitals or healthcare.
Okay.
I think that I think I've sort of, for now, I have said what I want to say using the fiction form, but I'll definitely continue to advocate for the healthcare system in Australia in a non-fiction sort of sense.
And how are you finding writing something now that you might not be like in the thick of, like you said, with The Registrar?
It's a lot harder. People do talk about the second novel problem, and I think In part, it's because you now know exactly how hard the work is, that it is a bit daunting. But also, it's very hard to go from this beautiful, polished, book that has had so many editors involved and everything is fantastic. And to go back to that first rough draft where it's messy and the sentences aren't very good and doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a struggle, but we persist.
Yeah. And Sharon wonders what you like to read and if maybe you've got any recommendations for us.
So my reading is a bit eclectic. I must confess I read literary fiction because I ought to. I read more commercial fiction because I enjoy it. The book I'm very excited about, which is actually being published tomorrow, is called The Stranger by Catherine Orr, and it is a feminist Western. And I had the opportunity of reading that early, and that was very exciting. The other book I've recently enjoyed is Every Version of You, which is speculative fiction written by a Melbourne author called Grace Chan.
Thanks for those recommendations. Kelly wonders, what has been the best part of your writing journey?
Oh, that's a great question too. I think one of the beautiful things about having this book out in the world is discovering what readers find enjoyable or find resonance with. And what's been really interesting is it's not often what I thought were the best parts of my own work. Those perfect sentences where I thought, this is as good as it gets in this book. That's not what readers are picking up on. It's completely different things. And if I had insight into that early, maybe those sentences would be slightly less clunky, for example, or maybe they are what they are. But I think having a work go out into the world and find its readers and find its own legs, it's now bigger than me. What I think about it is in some ways perhaps irrelevant because it means something to someone else all by itself, and that is really great.
And Kim wonders if any of your colleagues have read your book, and if they did, what sort of feedback did they give you?
Yeah, I had a few colleagues read it ahead of print. Obviously, they were my friends and they said it was wonderful because they have to. I've had a number of colleagues read it since, and to be honest, the early readers are probably friends and allies, and their feedback has been excellent. Now, there's the odd snarky review on Goodreads, but we all expect that. Probably the most powerful thing I think that has happened to me is one of my very senior colleagues apparently read it. And he hasn't reached out to me, but he has been reaching out to a lot of other people because he said that it opened his eyes to issues that he didn't even know existed, even though he had been in the industry for 40 years. And, he's one of the good guys. They've been really good to me and lots of other people as we went through. And is now making those phone calls to say, what should we do better? And that in and of itself has been really gratifying for me and almost justified the writing.
Yeah, I'm sure, And Kelly wonders if you have a favourite author.
I'm very, very bad at picking favourites, I've got to say. Whether that's authors or chocolates or wine. Not great with favourites. Probably the book that I reach to often that I would reread, probably more than others, would be Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I've read that a lot of times.
Yeah. And Wendy says, you mentioned burnout, which does affect many people in this field. Did you find the last few years particularly difficult in this way? And she also wondered if all the lockdowns might have given you more time to write.
Yeah, so the manuscript, I'll answer it in reverse. The manuscript was done before COVID started, really. The first draft plus was sort of done. Lockdown probably made it harder. I have 3 children, all of whom were in kinder or primary school through those lockdowns. So what little spare time I had not at work was often taken up assisting with learning from home and supporting my husband, who was trying to work from home as well with 3 kids in the house. And I don't know that I would have had it in me to write from scratch at that point. It was, I think, because the bones were there and I was mostly editing, that it felt possible. The other part of the question
was, did you find with the burnout the last few years particularly difficult?
Yeah, so I've definitely experienced burnout at various points in time, in part when I was training, in part when I've had young children. I did a whole lot of pro bono refugee work, which was on top of my usual job. And so I know that feeling. I'm very familiar with it, and I'm getting better at recognizing the early stages and not letting myself fall into a heap. For me, the pandemic had different challenges because I'm now in a relatively senior position within the medical hierarchy. And so truly my heart goes out to junior doctors and nurses, allied health, cleaners, support staff. Those were the people who really did it tough over the last couple of years, whereas I was, if I'm honest, in a little bit more of a protected position.
And Kim wonders if there was anything you would do differently when with your writing after finishing your first book. So anything you'd be doing differently the second time?
So when I wrote this, it was very by the seat of my pants. I knew the start and I knew the end, and everything else was filling it in. And I wrote it without a strong sense of the narrative arc or the characters' arcs, and that took a lot of work to fix. The thing that I'm trying to do now is to plan a little bit better. But likewise, in some ways, the planning is almost an impediment to writing, because you can actually spend quite a lot of time writing plans instead of actually writing. So ask me after the next book and I'll tell you which works better.
And I'm wondering, like, with your writing, we said before, like, how busy you are and everything. Do you plan some time in your day for writing, or just do it when you find you've got some spare time?
My whole life is by the seat of my pants, so it gets jammed in where it can. I spend a lot of time thinking. I do a bit of driving for work, and there are some days I'm in the car for 2 hours, so that is a great time to plan. And if I then get home and manage to write, that's great. I have also gotten better at pulling over on the side of the freeway and actually making a note of those brilliant thoughts that appear and then are gone half an hour later.
Yeah. And what do you hope readers will love about your book?
I hope they are entertained by it, first and foremost. A lot of the interviews have really focused on the issues in the health system and the sort of the grimmer, darker aspect of it. But ultimately, I hope people find that it's pacey, that it's interesting, that they learn something about the hospital system, that when they're, if you're ever interacting with the hospital system, whether as a patient or a carer or a friend, and you're sitting in that waiting room and you're wondering what on earth is happening on the other side of that door, I hope it gives them a little bit of an insight.
Yeah. And for you, what do you think makes a good story?
For me, I have to care about the characters, and I have to feel like there is movement. Those slow meditative reads. I have enormous respect for the craft, but maybe it's just because I'm too tired. I find it hard to be entertained by that. Whereas that's what I'm looking for in a book, is something that's a bit pacey and that actually draws my interest.
And when you're writing, do you have a snack or a drink that you have as your go-to?
I drink a lot of tea, and I find noise-cancelling headphones more than anything.
Okay.
And I will often play some sort of instrumental music. It's more about shutting out the world.
And when you finished your book, did you do something special to celebrate?
So when I finished the draft that I sent off to the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards, I finished it on a Friday, and I poured myself a drink. I texted my friends, and I'm like, yes, it's done. And then I sent it to my sister, and my sister read it overnight. She lives in the US, so
Okay.
I finished in the evening. So she read it overnight for me, and then she came back to me the next morning and said, "No, the ending's crap. Got to change it. It's terrible." So I spent the rest of the weekend doing that. And so ever since then, I've stopped celebrating the finish, because I've come to realize that no work is ever finished. It's just abandoned at one point when you think it's close enough.
Yeah. And when you were writing, did you share? Are you someone who shares as you write?
Oh, I love feedback, but I'm also cognizant of other people's time, and that they don't necessarily want to read unfinished ramblings. I had a couple of friends who were kind enough to read early drafts, and really, to be honest, I think the role of friends at that point is to tell you that it's not terrible and to keep going, not necessarily for substantive feedback. There were a couple of things that stressed me out. The sex scenes in the novel, that the writing of those did not come naturally at all. And I did inflict earlier versions onto friends to say, can you tell me if this is terrible or if it's okay?
Yeah. Did they have good feedback for you?
They did.
That's good to hear. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It's been great chatting to you, and I hope everyone goes out and checks the registrar. Like you said, I think it is a bit different than a lot of books out there, a different sort of genre in that. And like you said also, there's not a lot from the female point of view, so it's great to see something different. Do you want to let people know how they can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Twitter as Neela Jan. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Neela J. I do have a website, but it's much more of a professional website than a book website. But it does have contact details for my rooms, and emails and things will go through to my secretaries. And the book is available anywhere you can buy books.
Well, thanks so much, and good luck with your next book.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to everyone who joined in and asked questions. Thanks, everyone. Bye.